It's time for the Newsmaker Show on News Talk AM 1480 WLEA.
Good morning, I'm Brian O'Neill, and our news slogan here at WLEA is news first and fast. And one thing we also try to do in both our news and our local shows here is to split it up and get both sides on, especially during an election year like here we are in 2016. So yesterday on the show, Republican state legislators O'Mara and Noje. Today, we're on the line with writer and director for both TV and movies, well-known progressive commentator Sam Seder. Sam is the host of the Majority Report, which is online at majority.fm. He's also on WLEA Saturday nights on the Ring of Fire show. Sam Seder, glad to have you with us.
Thanks, Brian. Pleasure to be here.
Sam, from what I understand, first on the radio show you do that's on WLEA Saturday nights, Ring of Fire is done from 3 locations. I believe, from what I understand, you're in New York City, Robert Kennedy is in White Plains, New York, and Mike Papantonio is in Florida. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Papantonio is based down in Pensacola, and he is one of the nation's premier trial lawyers. In fact, people may have read recently about the case involving DuPont, which they had basically more or less caused about 3,500 people, perhaps more, to suffer all sorts of diseases, cancer and colitis, for basically dumping a chemical that they were supposed to dispose of in another way. And this is a huge case. Papantonio tried the first plaintiff of 3,500 a couple of months ago, and it could end up, you've already heard that the DuPont CEO stepped down. I think it's going to radically change that company. Hopefully it changes their practices as well. And Bobby Kennedy calls into the show, or I should say, ISDNs in, as we say in radio business, both from White Plains, but also from California. He splits his time back and forth.
And he's known, especially lately, for his work talking about vaccines.
Yeah, he has been really sort of pushing a certain level of skepticism about vaccines. And I have to say, one of the things I like about our show is that Bobby and I don't necessarily see eye to eye on all that stuff, but I think we both sort of agree that there's a level of scrutiny that we don't see, particularly when it comes to pharmaceuticals, that needs to be there. But he is one on the forefront of that. He's also on the forefront of fighting to make sure that our rivers and waterways in this country are protected. He is also working out in California. I know that, and I haven't had a chance to talk to him about, but this horrible, huge fracking leak of methane that's pouring into the atmosphere and has basically caused almost 3,500 people to evacuate their homes for months. So he is. He works on a lot of issues that deal with, protecting citizens and consumers, frankly. And, and he's very outspoken and comes from a heritage, like a direct heritage, that has been involved in that for years.
No doubt about that. And on yourself, Sam Seder, you've done work, I believe, Comedy Central. You've written scripts for television and movies, and you produced and directed too. If you could tell us about that.
Yeah, back in really it was sort of another life. I was a comedian, a stand-up, and then I started acting in sitcoms, and I did about probably a dozen pilots over the course of 5 or 6 years, some of which made it to air, and some guest spots. I still occasionally get recognized for some stuff I did on Sex and the City. And then I started directing my own work and shows like I'm with Busey, which was a fake reality show on Comedy Central. And, Gary Busey is, I don't want to be... Gary Busey is a challenge. Let's leave it at that. I don't want to get myself sued. And then about 12 years ago, my friend Janine Garofalo was asked to host a show on Air America. This was a radio network that was set up featuring Al Franken, Rachel Maddow, who's now on MSNBC. Franken, of course, is now Senator of Minnesota. And Janine Garofalo and I did an evening show, and I should say Mark Maron did the morning show. Chuck D from Public Enemy was on the network at the time. And I ended up doing radio, and for a couple of years I continued to write scripts for places like NBC and HBO and AMC, but after a while I realized that, I enjoyed this medium too much and enjoyed, frankly, talking about politics because, we live in an era right now where so much of there's a tremendous amount of polarization, and the country could go in very different directions. And so I think that's what's got people so tuned in, more so than I think I remember when I was a younger man.
On this Tuesday, January 26th, we're now just 6 days away from the Iowa caucuses. The Huffington Post, they're reporting that if younger voters turn out next week in Iowa, things could go in favor of U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders. But if the young people don't turn out, it'll be a big win for Hillary. Sam Seder, what are you hearing from your Iowa sources about how things are going to work out for the Democrats?
Well, Iowa is the trickiest state, I think, in the country to predict, because you can look at polls, and the polls, frankly, have been all over the map between Hillary and Bernie Sanders. I've seen polls with her up by 8. I've seen polls with her down by 8, all in the past week. And the tricky part about this is that it's not just the quantity of people who are voting for you in Iowa, because it's a caucus. And so it's actually the quality of the people. And it's not even just getting them to come out. It's getting them to literally physically stay sometimes 2 or 3 hours as the caucus process plays out. And it's also very important as to how savvy the people who come out are. In other words, how experienced are they in caucuses, or have they been trained? I know Bernie Sanders, I imagine Hillary Clinton has done the same thing. They put out videos to explain to their supporters what they have to do during the caucuses. So if you're relying on people who may be first-time caucus goers, you're at a disadvantage. 10 experienced caucus goers are always going to be worth more than 10 newbies, essentially. And so this is one of the challenges that Bernie Sanders has. I would say it's also one of the challenges, frankly, that Donald Trump has. Part of the issue is level of enthusiasm, and part of the issue is level of savvy about the process. So, I hear, frankly, depending on, I think, what people project onto their own hopes, I hear that Hillary is going to win there, and I hear that Bernie is going to win there. So I would be very hesitant to bet any part of my kids' college fund on either result. Frankly, I think it's going to be close. I can tell you this: it's much more important to Bernie's viability to win Iowa than to Clinton's. I think if Bernie loses Iowa, I think he's going to have some serious problems going forward, because it's already baked into the cake that people anticipate he's going to win New Hampshire, because he's coming from a state not only is very similar, but is literally next door. And then Bernie's going to have to go down south to South Carolina and perform with African Americans and Latinos, and he just doesn't have the numbers so far. He hasn't been able to convince those folks quite yet. So Iowa is really important to Bernie Sanders. And, of course, it's really important to Hillary Clinton insofar as she wants to shut the door on his campaign. And this wouldn't completely shut it, but it would certainly go a long way.
Was listening to your daily radio show, The Majority Report, on Monday. There was talk on the show about the difference between the Franklin Roosevelt-style Democrat and the European Social Democrat. Sam Seder, in this race, and maybe this is an obvious question, but who to you is the FDR Democrat and who to you is the European-style Democrat?
Well, I mean, I'm not convinced that Bernie Sanders isn't both of those things. I mean, to be honest with you, Bernie Sanders says he's a self-avowed social democrat. But when you look at the majority of his positions, they are, at the very least, in line with what the aspirations that FDR spoke of. And now, the reality is that during the New Deal, there were a lot of sort of deals cut to get this through that I think in many respects left some people on the sidelines. And part of that was because there was a big contingency of Southern Democrats at the time who were fairly racist and wanted to were very anti-union, and so there was some stuff that was sort of left on the table. But aspirationally speaking, I'm not convinced that Bernie Sanders is really too far from FDR. Now, the big difference between Clinton and Sanders, it seems to me, is that Bernie Sanders is really looking to push programs that are universal. So it's not a question of whether or not you are poor enough to be qualified to get some type of college loan or tuition help to go to college. He wants to make that an option available to everyone, including, as Hillary Clinton famously said, Donald Trump's kids. Now, from my perspective, if Donald Trump wants to send his kid to the one state school that is free, I'm perfectly happy to have Donald Trump's kids, take advantage of that, because Donald Trump will also be paying more in taxes to support a system like that. And that's the sort of the attitude that Bernie Sanders has. Everybody's got to contribute more, and that includes the middle class. But what they'll get out of the system will be universal and open to everybody. And Hillary Clinton is more sort of the sort of traditional liberal perspective, which is we're going to make sure that we have a very strong safety net. I think that both options are better than other options that may be presented across the political spectrum. But I tend to like the universality of certain programs. I'd like to see an option for everyone in the country, in the middle class, anybody, to have a tuition-free college option. I think that's really important for our society.
Talking with Sam Seder on today's Newsmaker Show, immigration goes without saying that's a huge issue this year. The Republicans want to cut down on the number of Middle Eastern immigrants and Mexican immigrants coming into the U.S. The Democrats say the Statue of Liberty is still up there. I think that was something that Governor Andrew Cuomo said. How much of a determining factor will that issue, immigration, be in the November elections?
Well, I think immigration is going to be a huge issue in the Republican primary. I mean, I think to a certain extent, to be honest with you, I think if you look across the general population, immigration isn't nearly as urgent of an issue as it is within the Republican Party. I mean, the reality is that Mexican immigration is actually at a net negative. There are more Mexicans who have been in this country without documentation who are leaving the country than coming in. Now, you have situations like Central American kids and families who are coming up from Central America because there's a huge amount of violence there, and people are trying to escape that violence. And when you talk about Middle Eastern, you're talking about Syrian refugees. And I think, broadly speaking, there's concern amongst the American public. There's a certain fear of ISIS and whatnot. I tend to think that's overblown. I don't think ISIS represents any type of existential threat to this country. But I would be surprised if immigration has nearly the same resonance amongst the general election as it does in the Republican Party. I mean, the Republican Party, it is more or less a litmus test as far as I can tell.
We're talking with Sam Seder, who co-hosts a show that's heard Saturday nights here on WLEA. The show is called Ring of Fire. Sam, the New York Daily News has an article out by Leonard Green who says that President Obama is ready to go, that he'll be more than happy to leave the White House when the time comes in January of next year. The president did tell the Daily News that things are better now than when he came into office. Your thoughts on the Obama presidency?
Well, I have a lot of critiques of President Obama, but they tend to be from the left. I, for one, there were certain decisions made very early on. I mean, I would have liked to have seen a larger stimulus. I think he tried to pivot to austerity and to deficit cutting too quickly. I mean, look, the reality is we have 2 million less government workers than we did 20 or 30 years ago. We laid off hundreds of thousands of government workers over the past 7 or 8 years, which is really unprecedented when you're talking about trying to recover from a recession. Because, I mean, if you go back and look at when Bush and Reagan, both Bushes, when they were coming out of recessions, they increased the numbers of government workers that were hired because that gets money into our economy. And so I would have liked to have seen more spending, less attempt to cut the deficit. I would have liked to have seen, instead of the Fed sending money to the banks, I would have liked to have seen them go directly to homeowners. I have a big problem with a lot of the stuff that happened on the financial side. With that said, I think, we've had record-breaking private sector job growth. We have 10 to 15 million more Americans who are covered by health insurance. And I like what's going on in terms of federal judges. I think it's a little bit late, but we're starting to see some work on global climate change, which I think is, the greatest problem that my kids are going to be dealing with when they are older. I mean, and hopefully, it won't happen before then, but I think we're already seeing, even in a place like Syria, a large part of what drove that civil war there was a function of severe droughts and a largely agricultural economy getting decimated. And so on the balance, I would have liked to have seen President Obama get a little bolder early on. I think he spent too much time trying to cut a deal with Republicans when they clearly weren't interested. And I have to say, I want to thank that element of the Republican Party that wouldn't take yes for an answer, because I didn't like the deal in the first place. So, but I do consider, have some issues with President Obama being willing to do that. And I think he's been really soft on the banks, frankly.
We're talking with Sam Seder here on the Newsmaker Show. Our conversation with Sam continues in just a moment. On the Newsmaker Show, Brian O'Neill on with talk show host Sam Seder, who's on WLEA Saturday nights on Ring of Fire. Sam, you're a New Yorker. I wanted to get your thoughts on the idea of former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg saying that he's thinking of running for president. Do you think that Bloomberg noticed Trump got into the presidential race and Bloomberg thought maybe he'd do what Trump did because it worked for Trump?
Yeah, I mean, look, the amount of money that Mike Bloomberg could afford to spend on a race, I mean, I think he could spend $1 billion, and it would be the equivalent of you or I scraping up all our change around the house and going down to the supermarket and putting in one of those machines and taking the cash out. I mean, he has so much cash. Now, I'm convinced that he probably saw Trump and said, here's a billionaire from New York who's going out there and doing it. But
right.
With that said, I also think that he probably knows that he has no path to the presidency. I mean, from what I've read, it appears that he is sort of vaguely threatening if Bernie Sanders is the Democratic nominee and Donald Trump or Ted Cruz is the Republican nominee, that he would jump in the race. But I think, If he was getting legitimate advice, I think he'd find that all he would do would be ensure that Donald Trump or Ted Cruz becomes the president. But with that said, look, you're a billionaire, and any political consultants at this point who are not attached to another campaign, they would love a job, and they would love a job that they know is well funded. So I don't think that that Bloomberg is going to get the kind of advice that would discourage him from jumping in. With that said, I've read that article about 3 or 4 times every 4 years. They say he's going to jump in, but I don't know. I guess we'll know in March.
As long as we're on the topic of New York City mayors, what do you think of the battle of the sound bites that's been going on here in New York State in recent weeks between New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio and Governor Andrew Cuomo?
Well, look, I think Cuomo was really stung, I think, in that his last re-election by Zephyr Teachout. I mean, Zephyr Teachout got an extraordinary portion of the vote that I think Andrew Cuomo was counting on. I mean, Andrew Cuomo wanted to beat what the margin of victory that his father had received when he was governor. He wanted to win with something 60% plus of the vote, so that he could speak of himself as a national candidate. That's what governors, that's usually the threshold when governors start getting talked about for national aspirations. And then Bill de Blasio is part of that wing of the Democratic Party that, in many respects challenged Cuomo. So, and I think, Cuomo probably sees Bill de Blasio as a potential threat down the road if Cuomo wants to run for another term. And so, I have to say as a New York City resident, and really, and I used to live upstate, up in the Hudson Valley area, there's a lot of things that Andrew Cuomo does that I don't appreciate as, a self-avowed liberal, even left of liberal. And the guy is very has been undercutting public schools, it seems to me. Now, he's tacked back on some things since that election because I think he's beginning to see that the Democratic Party, at least in New York and probably across the country, is not the same party it was in 1993. But it's de Blasio, I think, he can get into these tit for tats with Cuomo, but he should be doing more to shore up his base in New York. I mean, the universal pre-K that he instituted here is an amazing thing for New Yorkers of every economic strata. I mean, imagine if you're someone who did not have the option to send their kids to pre-K because it was going to cost you $17,000 a year. I mean, that's an incredible amount of money for people in really across the board. And he has made that like kindergarten, which is that everybody's going to get a right to that free education. It's really important for low-income kids because we know studies show what kind of deficit they come into kindergarten in terms of vocabulary and listening vocabulary. It also is a boon to them because it means that parents don't have to pay for child care at that age, and it's something that I'd like to see him go out there and be more aggressive about touting it because it's been incredibly successful as far as I can tell.
You talked about Zephyr Teachout a couple of minutes ago. Zephyr Teachout, of course, ran against Governor Cuomo in the last governor's race. If Zephyr Teachout wins the House seat that she's running for here in New York State, do you think she would or could she come back and run for governor again and beat Cuomo maybe?
I mean, I think it would take a couple of years. I mean, I think she would have to, sit in that seat for at least a couple of cycles. But I don't know if that's ultimately her agenda. But I think, look, she did quite well in that last race, and she's talking about things that are, I think, have a broad appeal, not just to Democrats, not just to people on the left, but across the board. Antitrust, which she really focuses on, that is the domination of big corporations that squeeze out their competition in the private sector that end up, shortchanging and cheating consumers, both in terms of just the private market, but also in terms of things like subsidies and government subsidies. I mean, those are issues that resonate with both people on the right and the left. And so if she has a position, a soapbox where she could get broad attention for an agenda like that, that's an agenda where it would not be hard to imagine that she would find Republicans, very conservative Republicans, who might be willing to join with her and sponsor legislation. I think that becomes a very powerful a position for someone like that to pursue. I mean, remember, she was also just head of an organization that was talking about getting money out of politics, and there is a lot of bipartisan support for that issue. And so, I think she could be one of the most interesting Congress people we have in this country if she wins that race.
Yeah, she's very interesting to speak with. Spoke with her during the race. Sam, I've enjoyed this interview very much. Great guest. Loved having you on. Sam Seder, he's heard Saturday nights here on the station on Ring of Fire. Sam, thanks for joining us.
Brian, a real pleasure. I'm really excited to be on WLEA. I had some family in Elmira for years and years. They've left for warmer climates, but I love that part of the state, and I'm really glad that you're having us on Saturdays.
Sam Seder, thanks for joining us. It's AM 1480 WLEA Hornell.